Well, we've got absolutely massive tides over the next few days, so that's a great opportunity for me to come out and do a bit of foraging, do a bit of clamming, which is what I like to do about 2 or 3 times a year when I've got really big tides. But what I'm after today, I'm mainly after just one clam today, and that's the razor clam. So just going to wander. The tide has still got an hour before we got low water, but because it's such a big tide, it's already starting to expose the razor clam beds. So the idea is I'm just going to wander the beach like this, looking for the burrows. Now I've done a few videos now about how you find razor clam burrows. But I'm looking for the signs, looking for the burrows, the crater shapes, and mainly and looking for the squirts. And going to be using salt today, as usual, to expose the razor clams. And it looks like I've got one there. Yeah, so that looks like a razor clam burrow. So we'll pop a bit of salt on, get that down the burrow. Yep, that's definitely a razor clam. Usually when it's a razor clam and you pop the salt on the burrow like that, you tend to get an immediate reaction like that, whereas with other clams you don't. And yeah, you can see it starting to, there it comes already. Leave it a bit. What I normally do, if just push a little bit more salt down, and that normally does the trick. Well, that's a pretty good start. I've literally only just started, and I got my first razor clam. Fantastic. And usually where you find one like that, you normally find some more nearby. And I've already, while I was pulling that one up, I've already seen a squirt of another razor clam, and the squirt came from around there it is there, came from there. So we'll put a bit of salt there, and hopefully I'll get 2 within a foot of each other. As I've mentioned before, sometimes they don't immediately come up, and other times they do. But it looks like this one's going to take a bit of time before it does. But hopefully, if it doesn't come up now, it will come up in a while, and I'll be able to pick it up later. Right, so carry on wandering the beach and see if I can get a few. Well, this one's too small, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this back. The size limit in Cornwall is 10 centimetres, but that one's way too, just not worth taking. It's probably borderline size. So pop that back, just pop it back in its burrow like that, and it'll pull itself back down. There's the one from earlier. That's the very first one I got almost immediately as I started, and I said that there was another one close by, but it didn't come up immediately. But it's come up now. Well, this is what I usually find with razor clams. You get one, you find one, and look at that, there's squirts all everywhere, all within about 1.5 foot of each other. That's usually what can happen. Find one, and then you may find another one very, very close. One of the quickest ways to get them is if you see one of these sort of crater shapes, or is actually if you pop your foot by it, and if you get a distinctive squirt, that's a pretty it's a pretty, you can be pretty sure that that's a razor clam. I often do that. Instead of salting every single crater that I see, sometimes you put your foot by it if you get a really good squirt, and then you can be pretty sure that that's a razor clam. Well, there's one that I salted earlier and didn't come up straight away, so that's great. There's another one, burrow that was salted, took a while to come up. So yeah, as I mentioned before in the previous videos, always pays to retrace your steps where you've salted, and this can often happen. I mean, sometimes they come up, you find a burrow, you see a squirt, you put your salt down, and like that first one that you saw me get, it comes up almost immediately. Then others, they take a while, they might be a bit deeper down, it takes a while for get that salt work down the burrow, and then eventually if it is a razor clam, they will eject themselves. Well, that's a typical example of what I've been looking for on this session, is a distinctive squirt which came from here, and then get the salt down, and hopefully if it doesn't come up straight away, it'll come up later. And then not far from that one there's another one here. Now you can dilute the salt. You can dilute it with water in a squirty bottle and squirt it down the burrow. That's another way you can do it to get your salt to last a bit longer. Right, we're at low water now, so about 15 minutes the tide will start turning and coming in. So what I'm going to do is I've salted some burrows quite close to the low water mark, so I'm just going to retrace my steps to see if there's any ejected, so that I don't lose them to the tide. And then just a little bit of flooding tide, and we'll call it a day. This is why it always pays to retrace your steps. If I'd left that much longer, this is quite close to the low water mark, if I'd left that another 15 minutes, it would have got covered up again by the tide. And there's another one. Now you often see this when you've got the big tides close to the low tide level, and that's a scallop. Now sometimes this one is way under the size limit. The size limit is 10 centimeters across, and of course this one is way under. But yeah, definitely worth looking out for these as well on the big tides. But that will stay where it is. Well, there's our razor clams, and it turned out to be a pretty good session in the end. I think I've got 20 odd there in a fairly short session, so that's great. So what I'm going to do is get these home and give them a wash, and I'm actually going to portion them up, and I'm actually going to freeze them. Now, what I've found over the years of collecting and eating razor clams is you collect some, and yeah, sure, you maybe eat some fresh, freeze the others down to be eaten another time. And I've actually found that with razor clams, I wouldn't do it with other shellfish, but with razor clams, to me, they're actually better after they've been frozen. And what seems to happen is it tenderizes the meat. So now I tend to eat them mainly from frozen. So I'm going to eat some of these in the normal way, maybe either pan fried or steamed. But what I'm going to do for this video is I'm going to smoke some of them. Now, as I mentioned, when I got home, I portioned the clams up and popped them in the freezer, and I've taken some out to thaw right out when I know I've got the time to do the smoking, which is now. And what happens when you freeze razor clams and you thaw them right out, the shells open right up like that, which is really useful when you want to smoke them. But what I would suggest if you're going to smoke clams, fresh clams, is maybe steam them open first in a bit of liquor, quickly steam them open and then take them out to be smoked. So once these are thawed right out, I give them another rinse to try and rinse out any bits of grit, any bits of sand that are left in them. Now, of course, there's nothing new about smoking clams. You can smoke mussels, which are absolutely fantastic, and I occasionally do that. You can smoke scallops, which are absolutely delicious. And of course, as I'm going to show you, you can smoke and enjoy razor clams. Now, when it comes to the texture of a razor clam, in my opinion, and some people ask about this, what can you compare them like? I can compare the texture very similar to a scallop. I mean, the taste is different, but the texture is very, very similar to a scallop, so it's quite delicate. Okay, so I'll get the smoker all set up and we'll start smoking these absolutely fantastic razor clams. So I've got my burner filled with meths, so we'll light that. And I've got the tray filled with a thin layer of dust, and in this case it's beech. And then next goes the drip tray. And then the first rack of razor clams, followed by the second rack of clams. And then on with the lid. And that's it. And that burner filled up smokes for about 20 minutes. Now, whenever I smoke anything, whether it be fish or shellfish, I cannot resist. I absolutely love to taste them straight from the smoker when they're still warm. So that's what we're going to do now. And you'll notice, of course, that the clam, the meat in the clam, is exactly the same as mussels, will shrink right down. But I'm going to, still got a lot of moisture there. And if you've never tried this and you like razor clams, or you like shellfish, mussels, scallops, you've got a home smoker, you have got to try this. It is absolutely delicious. The smell as well. It really is fantastic. Now, in my opinion, if you can do it, if you can time it, is to smoke them, take them inside and serve them while they're still warm. But you don't have to do that. I'm going to eat these. Wife and I are going to eat these later this evening. Going to have it as a little first course with a dipping sauce. But this one, absolutely brilliant. Okay, so take those indoors, allow them to cool. When they cool right down, I'll pop them in the fridge, and then, as I said, serve them later as a first course. All right, now to do the taste test of these cold. Now, as I mentioned, I've got the lovely mustard dipping sauce and a nice bit of bread to go with it. And let's try. I'll try without the dipping sauce first. And I can promise you, still absolutely delicious. They're not tough and chewy. And as I mentioned, I find in any way of cooking razor clams that they're much better after they've been frozen. And great with the dipping sauce. Now, when you're eating whole razor clams like this, whether it be smoked or maybe they've steamed, it's pretty obvious to me what you might not want to eat. I'm sure some people will just eat the whole lot. But for me, what I tend to do, you've got this bit here at the top there, which is basically the bit that protrudes out of the sand. The top of the neck, the top of the razor clam. What I tend to do is pinch that bit off, and then you've got the stomach area there, and I just tend to pick the meat. I find it easy to eat them by hand. Just pick the meat from around that. So it's only just those two bits around the stomach area, that little bit there, but the rest of it is absolutely delicious. And as I said, if you've never tried it, do. I don't think you'll be disappointed if you like this sort of thing. Now, before I close, several of you have asked me, who's that person that you keep serving food and eats the food, but we never see her? Well, that obviously is the wife, and she won't appear on camera these days, but she was famous once. Her name is Ayesha. She's otherwise known as She Who Must Be Obeyed. As I said, she was famous once, but now she's a bit of a recluse and refuses to appear in front of the camera. But if you don't believe me, if you go onto Google, and if you just Google Ayesha, She Who Must Be Obeyed, and then the wife will come up. But these days, I asked her, I said, are you going to appear this evening? Because people keep asking, why don't we ever see the wife? Why don't we ever see the wife? She said, no, I've had enough of all that. I've done all that years ago. No more. Cameras, go away. So there you go. If you don't believe me, Google Ayesha, She Who Must Be Obeyed. So once again, I hope you found that useful, and many thanks for watching.